Chapter 1840, Four Angle of Thinking. Zhang Yi's approach is exactly the same as Deng Shintong's. But this choice is actually the choice that most people will make. The girl in red said, "When it's none of your business, you can make decisions from a god's perspective. But when you need to kill someone with your own hands, you may make the opposite decision. This is what you humans do." Complexity. After listening to what the girl in red said, Zhang Yi slowly raised the corners of his mouth, his expression full of teasing. "Ah, did you misunderstand something?" Facing the calm gaze of the red-dressed girl, Zhang Yi said calmly, "I don't care whether they live or die. If it does not conflict with my interests, I don't mind doing everything I can to save their lives. But in this dilemma, no matter what you do, you will die. It seems that there is a choice, but in fact there is no choice. But for you, it is the best choice." He raised a finger, narrowed his eyes, and said, "Because at this time, you don't need to consider the life and death of the two tracks. You only need to consider your own interests." This was the first time the girl in red heard such an answer, which caused a strange fluctuation in her eyes. "What has this got to do with your interests? These 5 people are complete strangers to you. What you want to say is that if you save 5 people, they will reward you more than if you save 1 person?" Zhang Yi waved his hand. "Those are all uncertain factors, not the crux of the problem at this moment." He continued, "No matter what they said, it would not affect us judgment at the time. The reason why you chose to turn the train to a track with only 1 track is just for your own safety. Because if the train really runs over 5 bodies, the risk it will have to bear is far greater than the risk of running over 1 body. So, since there must be people who have nothing to do with you who have to die, you can only choose the approach that maximizes your own interests at this time. It's that simple." Zhang Yi spread his hands, his expression not changing as he said this. "As for later, you asked you to push with your own hands to stop the train from moving forward. You probably understood that you thought you wanted to sacrifice the interests of a few people to safeguard the interests of the majority. You are totally wrong. Because what you care about most is your own interests. As for other people, whether it is 1 person, 5 people, 1,000 people, or 10,000 people, you don't care that much. So, why do you need to bear the psychological guilt of killing 1 person for 5 people who have nothing to do with you?" Zhang Yi's words surprised the girl in red for a long time. There was no expression on her face, but her shaking eyes were like the surface of a lake with a stone thrown into it, and it took a long time for it to calm down. There were so many people participating in the trial this time, but most of them said the same thing. The standard they use to judge behavior is nothing more than the conflict between individual interests and collective interests. Only Zhang Yi doesn't care about any mess at all. From beginning to end, he was determined to live only for his own interests. As long as it is beneficial to him, he can switch between the principle of maximizing benefits and the principle of freedom supremacy at any time. To put it simply, in his world, he is the only one at the center. This strong self-belief deeply shocked the girl in red. She was just a little surprised when she discovered the existence of a species as intelligent as Yang Xinxin. But for a superintelligent life form of an advanced civilization like her, Yang Xinxin is just somewhat outstanding. But this was the first time she had seen someone like Zhang Yi. Oh, maybe there were similar things in her civilization in the early days of its long history. However, with the rapid evolution of their civilization, this kind of individualized thinking, and even some extreme ones, gradually disappeared. She looked at the human male in front of her, and from his eyes, she could feel that he truly believed that he was the center of the world. "You think so, you are here." Zhang Yi repeated these words silently in his heart. He had read Wang Sheng's Xinxue countless times. Whenever he was confused, he would take a look at it, which would help him see the future path clearly and make his mind clear. The world exists because there is someone observing it. Therefore, Zhang Yi can think of the world as revolving around Zhang Yi. Once Zhang Yi disappears, the world that Zhang Yi does not observe will also disappear for Zhang Yi. So, no matter what you do, just follow your heart. The red-clothed girl's eyes sparkled with light. This was an answer that she had never heard from the other participants in the trial. She was very pleased, so she said to Zhang Yi, "This is a very interesting answer, so I decided to give you a reward." Zhang Yi's eyes suddenly lit up. In fact, when he first made the choice, he didn't know what the correct answer was. But he is very smart. He understands that it is meaningless to play tricks in front of intelligent life forms of higher civilizations, so he simply chooses to be his true self. On the contrary, it was this kind of honesty that earned him the admiration of the girl in red. The girl in red raised her hand, and a ray of light emerged from her palm, and the next moment it went straight into Zhang Yi's body. Zhang Yi had a very special feeling, as if his soul was pulled out of his body and he was looking down at himself from a god's perspective. The feeling of separation of soul and body was so real, and at this moment the whole world seemed to have come to a standstill, and the movement of things was extremely slow. In the whole world, only his almost spiritual supernatural being and the girl in red can move freely. An indescribable feeling emerged in his spirit. It was as if I had experienced a kind of sublimation. At that moment, a white light burst out from his eyes, shining brightly, like a white light falling from the edge of the eye and shooting into his pupils. He felt as if he had been there for a century, and when he came to his senses, great changes had taken place inside his body. He did not realize that his abilities had become more powerful, but that something fundamental had changed. Zhang Yi's eyes were a little swollen, but not painful. It was as if something warm was flowing around his eyeballs. He covered his eyes. That special power was gathering and then settling. The girl in red said, "Come on. Please go to the next levels." Zhang Yi raised his head and said sincerely, "Thank you." He was extremely excited at this moment. What was happening to him was like a miracle to him. The girl in red simply smiled and said, "This is the reward you deserve. In my long existence, I haven't met an interesting spirit like you for a long time." Zhang Yi's body slowly turned into particles and dissipated on the spot. The girl in red stood there, quietly thinking about the answers he had just given. Not long after, another identical girl in red appeared next to her. "The answers you got seem quite interesting." The third girl in red also appeared in this space. "I take my own existence as the only meaning of the universe, and I have shaped my own meaning of life. This ability to understand is very powerful." The second girl in red also appeared. "Maybe he can be that candidate." The fifth girl in red, the sixth, the seventh. Many girls in red appeared in this space. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters anymore. We originally had no hope for anything. When you understand everything, you will fall into deeper despair. But his thinking gave me a new understanding. It's useless. That's because his eyes can see too little, so he doesn't understand what true despair is. Wait and see. He's very interesting. Good. A confusing light flashed before Zhang Yi's eyes, and the next moment, the world before his eyes changed again. This ability to control space makes Zhang Yi, a bishop-level space-time alien, feel inferior. The power of the great god-level civilization has reached an incredible level. The scene before his eyes was still a white space, but soon as his feet landed on a piece of white solid ground, black crisscrossing lines quickly and evenly spread from his feet in all directions. Soon, an entire white hexahedral room appeared. The white space is divided into square grids with black lines, thus creating a huge room. This feeling seemed familiar to Zhang Yi, as it was very similar to the simplest three-dimensional drawings he had learned in school. Even junior high school students must have drawn a three-dimensional picture of a hexahedron with a pencil on a piece of white paper. This world feels very unreal. Until this moment, many shadows appeared in this world. Many of the people who had entered this world with them before were standing on the floor of the White Room. Emperor Shur, King Arthur, Zeus of Asgard. Among these figures, Zhang Yi also saw some very strange and unfamiliar ones. Some were wrapped in a huge white battlesuit, with no skin exposed on their bodies. Water waves could be seen swaying in the translucent mask of the huge helmet. There was a type of creature covered in a black robe with a white knot wrapped around its waist and a thick tail exposed from under the robe. There were also lizards wrapped in pitch-black armor, looking around with their arms folded. There was a young man with long black hair that reached his heels. His bangs covered half of his face, but you could still see his skin was as white as snow. Zhang Yi frowned, thinking carefully back to when he came here. He did not see these creatures in the human coalition. Most of the people present at that time were famous figures, and Ypsilon, with his existence, was not qualified to enter the front line of the battlefield. Could it be that these guys are showing special forms? That shouldn't be the case either. The first 2 tests are written exams, and there is no fighting involved. Or is it that the tests they experienced were different from mine? Zhang Yi was very suspicious, but he felt familiar with some people. But most of them were wearing combat uniforms, and only a few showed their real faces, so there was no way to be sure. At this moment, Yang Xinxin's voice came to Zhang Yi's ears. "Brother, you come out." As soon as Zhang Yi turned his head, Yang Xinxin seemed to appear out of nowhere, ran in front of Zhang Yi, hugged his arm, and had a gentle smile on her face. Zhang Yi was not surprised at all, and nodded with a smile. Yes. It was inevitable that Yang Xinxin would pass the trial. With her mind, this trial could not be simpler. And gradually, more and more figures appeared in this white space. The first 2 levels screened out many people. Ling and the cross-masked knight opened the light gate. So many people took the opportunity to run in. They don't care about the number of participants. All those who are unqualified will be eliminated after going through their many tests. It is even possible that everyone will be eliminated. Emperor Shirtian, King Arthur, and other strong men were not eliminated. As they stand at the top of the alien world on the planet, no matter what flaws they have in their temperament, their character, beliefs, and strength are beyond doubt. Given the difficulty of the first 2 levels, they will definitely be able to pass them. Feeling Zhang Yi's gaze, Emperor Shirtian gave him a proud smile. He always had that expression, with his toes slightly raised and a calm smile on his face, as if he didn't care about anything because he was the only one who was superior. However, when facing Zhang Yi, his chi cultivation skills were a little worse, and he could not get over the defeat to Zhang Yi for a long time. Zhang Yi just smiled, too lazy to argue with the other party at this moment. Slowly, people from Zhang Yi's team appeared one after another. However, some people were eliminated. Zhang Yi did not see Uncle, Zhou Haimei, Yang Xia, and others. Nearly half of the members of the God team and the Fukage team were eliminated. But even so, more and more people gathered around him, and in the end there were still more than 20 people left. Such a scene made Indra feel a little indignant. Not only him, all the other human teams looked at Zhang Yi and others strangely. In order to encircle and suppress Lordek, none of their team members in Ypsilon went to the battlefield to avoid casualties. But this is not a problem at all for Zhang Yi. But now, Zhang Yi has grasped a huge advantage. In this place, the fighting power is balanced. Everyone's abilities are at the same level. That is to say, even a bishop-level inhuman could fail when facing a delta-level inhuman. And the people around Zhang Yi are almost equal to the sum of all other human mutant teams. If a fight breaks out at that time, it will be terrible. Merlin and Lancelot stood beside King Arthur. Lancelot held a great sword and frowned. That guy, isn't this cheating? Listening to Lancelot's complaints, King Arthur just smiled faintly. He crossed his arms and said, "Don't be nervous. They won't be a threat to us. At least, not now." Lancelot frowned upon hearing this and said, "King, how can you be sure that he won't attack us?" King Arthur did not speak. Merlin, who had long silver-gray hair, smiled and spoke for him. "Lancelot, your little head must be confused. If we can kill it while here, then the administrators of this world would not have deliberately controlled our supernatural powers from the very beginning. Even outside the light gate, we will be killed by the 6-winged creatures of the mechanical civilization. So, this place is restricted by rules. Chaos is an extremely cautious person. He won't take action before he understands the rules clearly." King Arthur smiled and agreed with Merlin. Merlin said, looking in all directions of the large white room. "Besides, there are quite a few powerful characters among these people. Haven't you noticed that there are many new faces?" Lancelot's attention has always been on Zhang Yi, and he didn't pay too much attention to others, because most of them are old acquaintances. After listening to Merlin's words, He glanced around and found something was wrong. How could this happen? Where did these extra guys come from? Zhang Yi, Yang Xinxin, Lu Karen, Fatty Sue, and others gathered together. Some of them might not have finished the trial yet, so they were waiting for the girl in red to give further instructions. So, using this short halftime break, they began to discuss the current situation. Everyone knew that they had gone through the same test, but the answers they gave were different, even completely the same, which made everyone feel confused. I thought mine was the standard answer. The genius. Fatty Sue held his chin with one hand and analyzed seriously. It seems that there must be something I didn't calculate. Zhang Yixiao didn't look at him, but asked Yang Xinxin directly. Xinxin, what do you think about this matter? Yang Xinxin smiled slightly and gave her opinion without any hesitation. The trolley problem itself has no standardized answer. Fatty Sue was stunned for a moment. The tram problem? But that's obviously a high-speed train. Yang Xinxin frowned slightly and had to explain simply. The trolley problem is a philosophical problem, and it has existed in the human world for a long time. The administrators asked us this question, and no one can give a perfect answer. Simply put, it's like if your mother and your wife fell into the water at the same time. Who would you save? Fatty Sue raised his head proudly, puffed out his chest, and said, "This question is not difficult. Of course, I will save my mother." Zhang Yi couldn't help but applaud Fatty Sue. Okay. I hope that when you have a wife one day, you can tell her this. Fatty Sue chuckled and said, "Why should I be afraid? My wife is waterproof. She will be fine even if she falls into the water." Puff. Although many people were used to Fatty Sue's clear stupidity, they still couldn't help but spit at this moment. I was completely speechless. Yang Xinxin took a deep breath, decisively ignored Fatty Sue, and turned to look at Zhang Yi. So when faced with this test, I knew that the managers just wanted to see our thinking, logic, and attitude in solving problems when faced with situations. Maybe it involves some areas of human nature. She raised a finger. From the beginning, the messenger of the great god-level Ming said that this was a screening test. They're looking for creatures that meet their requirements for some special purpose. Then, most people whose problem-solving methods or logical thinking are not up to standard will be eliminated. For example, someone who is wavering and hesitant is probably not the person they want to find. Yang Xinxin's explanation made many people present nod their heads. Xiao Honglian held her chin and said in a calm tone, "I didn't hesitate at all when I made the choice. So, is this the key to my passing?" But Yang Xinxin glanced around and said, "There are still a lot of people here now. Besides," she said in a deep voice with her eyes fixed, "it seems that there are more people than before." "You have discovered this," Zhang Yi said lightly. There were more and more people here, and more unfamiliar figures appeared. Those guys, why don't they look like humans? Fatty Sue looked at a figure not far away, about 5 or 6 meters tall, covered in black armor, with a long and thick tail behind him, and his voice trembled a little. "Isn't this the result of an alien's transformation? Why does he look so familiar?" Without him saying anything, everyone could tell who he looked like. The commander of the Wulwan Empire, who once roamed across the Sea of Sky and almost destroyed the entire Huashu kingdom, the gatekeeper of the underworld. Deng Shintong stared in another direction. If you insist on saying so, then the person next to him looks a bit like someone from Qinling Mountains. The direction he was looking at was the young man with long black hair, a slim figure, and skin as white as snow. Zhang Yi took a breath and felt his body tense up. His hands unconsciously hung at his sides, with his palms slightly bent. He was in the best condition to run or attack at any time. It seems that this time, we are not the only ones attracted here. In addition to humans and mechanical civilizations, there are other groups that did not miss this opportunity and came to the world behind the light gate. The god-level wise managers welcomed all of them and also allowed them to participate in the trials. Brian, Newton, and Magneto appeared here. They came to Zhang Yi and others and greeted Zhang Yi. "Hi, bro. Looks like everything is going well for you guys." "Phew, but it seems a bit crowded here." Brian looked around and then tugged at the collar around his neck. "There are so many bad smells here. It's really disgusting." Looking at Brian, Zhang Yi suddenly remembered that he was a dog. So he walked over and lowered his voice to Brian and said, "Those guys over there, what do you smell from them?" His eyes turned to the new faces. Brian frowned and said to Zhang Yi, "They come from different places. They smell like dirt. Oh, I smell the scent of those lizard men. And the smell of seawater." He didn't make any obvious movements, but still signaled Zhang Yi with his eyes to look at the humanoid creatures wrapped in dark blue special combat uniforms. Are there advanced intelligent creatures in the underwater world? But I should have guessed it earlier.